WWE reported its first quarter earnings on Thursday and beat Wall Street projections. They took in $291 million in revenue with over $24 million in profit. That is compared to $182 million in revenue and $7 million in losses for the same quarter a year ago. Vince McMahon admitted during his investors' call that the pandemic really did not affect this quarter outside of the final few weeks. It really covered January to March, and only the tail end was really affected by everything that's been going on. Among the things he said, I'm just plucking out a few interesting things. I'm not getting into all the numbers and all that kind of dull stuff. But among the things that he said when he was taking questions was that he's not sure that not only when they're going to be able to get back into the live event business again with crowds, he's not sure they're going to even be in the live event business going forward in the way that they used to be. So not that we're never going to have, shows with crowds again, but in terms of, I'm assuming that means a reduction in the number of live events and house shows that they do, which they were already starting to pull back on that a little bit. And I've talked about the importance of house shows and live events and why you really can't ever eliminate them. You shouldn't eliminate them. I don't think a lot of the talent would want the company to eliminate them outright. But certainly, scaling back on them, could be beneficial in terms of cutting down on the number of injuries, and the amount of wear and tear on some of the talent. And it sounds like in light of all this could completely change the way that they do business. Because even when things die down, and Vince said this during the call, he's not sure what that's going to look like in terms of, do you seat people apart by 6 feet or more? So you can't have people sitting next to each other. Unless, if you come with a family, if you come with somebody like a friend, perhaps you can sit together. But then maybe you keep a separation of 3 or 4 seats, between you and the person that would ordinarily be next to you. What that would do is, that would mean that you can't have as many people in the building. You wouldn't be able to say, hey, we have 10,000 people or 15 or 20,000 people. For stadium shows like a WrestleMania, that would be even worse. Practically speaking, I don't know how practical all of that is. I guess it would be. You just wouldn't be allowed to have as many people. He was talking about maybe you check people's temperature when they come into the buildings. I could see that creating a logjam. So it's going to be a very different world. Once things start to die down, normal is a relative term. I don't know that the normal that we knew before is going to be the normal that we kind of get back to. And that's basically what he was saying. I don't know what that looks like. Now, with these changes, he says they plan to do more cinematic type matches like the ones they did at WrestleMania. So now he can finally say they really do make movies. We've heard him say that over the years. In WWE, we make movies. It's like a 2-hour, 3-hour movie every Monday night. We make movies. Forget their actual movie division. I'm not talking about that. Now he can honestly say, we make movies. The more of these movie-type matches that they do, my fear is that they go overboard with it. You do too many of them. I want to see them do more cinematic matches. I just think there has to be a balance here. You can't be doing them every single week. Apparently, we're going to get a couple more coming up at Money in the Bank. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but we are getting more of those matches. If you didn't like them, too bad. We're getting more of them. There's also uncertainty around whether they will be able to hold a second Sweet Saudi Money show later this year. Obviously, the Saudis want one. That may not be possible. If it isn't, he said, no big deal, because we're just going to tack it onto the back end of our 10-year agreement. So we're still going to do the show. It just may be later on in the agreement. So Sweet Saudi Money 6, very much up in the air right now for 2020. Then he talked about the ratings. The ratings have not been good. SmackDown just turned out for the second week in a row its lowest rating ever on Fox since coming to Fox back in October. Raw ratings have been dropping each week. I think the last 2 weeks, I believe, maybe 3, have been sub 2 million viewers overall. Vince McMahon attributed the lower Raw ratings. Now, I think he said the SmackDown ratings have largely been unchanged. He can no longer say that. After this week, he can no longer say that. But he was talking about Raw. He attributed the lower Raw ratings, in large part, to all of the new talent. The fact that they've had to use new talent that people don't know, They don't know who they are. They don't recognize them. And they have been using new faces on the show. I would even throw Apollo Crews in there. Apollo Crews may as well be a new face because what the hell have they ever done with him before? So he attributes it largely to the fact we've had to rely on new talent. We're trying to bring new talent into the show. And then he made a comment about how, and we don't have Brock Lesnar. Obviously, he says we don't have Brock Lesnar on the show anymore. As if that's a reason, as if that's the reason, or one of the primary reasons for the lower Raw ratings. We don't have Brock Lesnar on TV anymore. This company has been hemorrhaging viewers on Mondays for years with Brock Lesnar doing limited dates on that show. Now he loses the championship. Now he's not on TV. And by God, the ratings are down because we don't have Brock Lesnar. They were doing some of Raw's lowest ratings with Brock Lesnar on the show. Now, yes, some people are going to need time to get adjusted to the new faces, Angel Garza and Austin Theory, Bianca Belair just made her debut. Probably a few other ones I'm not thinking of. Yes, people will need to buy into these new people. They'll need time to adjust. But that is not the reason why Raw is now sub 2 million viewers every week. There is a segment of the audience that just cannot watch these empty arena shows. They can't do it. Yeah, I know CM Punk made that comment a few weeks ago. He called these shows unwatchable. He said these shows without a crowd are unwatchable. There are a lot of people who would agree with him and who simply cannot watch wrestling like that. That goes for WWE. That goes for AEW. Now, how much of a chunk of the audience is that? I think it's enough of a chunk that you're seeing Raw ratings that are now 1.8 million and 1.9 million, and it's probably going to go down even a little bit more than that. We're about to find out what the true base of their audience is that will watch no matter what, because the Raw ratings have never been lower than they are right now. Since this show debuted in 1993, we have reached the bottom. Or have we? I don't know. I don't know that we have reached the bottom. But we're scraping the bottom of the barrel now. And I'll guarantee you that has as much to do with it as anything. Certainly more than Brock Lesnar not being on the show. They also confirmed the recent rumors that there will be no video game this year. I would argue they didn't have one last year either. But there will be no 2K21 this year. There will be some kind of announcement. It looks like a positive announcement of some kind. They're promoting big news on the video game front, on the future of the franchise. It's going to be revealed on Monday morning. So we will find out then what that big news is. At a meeting last Tuesday of the Orange County Board of Commissioners in Florida, there was a statement read from what was said to be an anonymous WWE employee named John. I don't know if it's John Cena, John Layfield, but an anonymous employee named John, who did not want to reveal their identity for fear of retribution, who alleges that he is being forced to work the company's TV tapings during the stay-at-home orders, and he requested that the government step in and stop the company from running any more shows for safety reasons. The anonymous employee claimed that although the company is limiting the number of employees at each taping and taking sanitary precautions, the nature of what they do requires them to touch one another and ignore social distancing recommendations. He says, I am unable to speak out as I need this job, and I know that if I do so, I will be fired. That is, if I approach the higher-ups in the company, I will lose my job. For its part, WWE responded to the allegation with the following statement. They said, these accusations are not true. Employees know that they can confidentially go to human resources, not the public. Notwithstanding the appropriate protocol, no one would be fired if they were uncomfortable with their surroundings. We've made accommodations for individuals upon request. Well, I mean, you can understand. I mean, the company just fired a whole bunch of people. They just laid off a whole bunch of employees. They laid off a whole bunch of talent. What the reasons were, we don't know. We can kind of figure in some cases guys were being paid a lot of money and they weren't being used, and so that's why they cut them. But we don't know what their rationale. Maybe some of those people went to the company and said, look, I don't want to work. I don't feel comfortable. And then all of a sudden they ended up being fired. We don't know. And by the way, just because you go to HR, okay, and I'm not trying to paint all HR people with a broad brush here, but just because you go to HR in your company does not mean that it will not get back to your bosses. So I can understand someone being afraid to go to HR. Don't go to the public. Go to human resources. It'll all be fine. That's not the case in every company. All that being said, we can't be sure this is even an actual WWE employee because it could have been anybody submitting that claim. It could have been a fan, for all we know. Although when I saw the word notwithstanding in that WWE statement, I thought for sure Vince wrote it himself. That is a Vince-ism. There are certain Vince McMahon words. There are certain what I call Vince-isms. Notwithstanding is one of those words. That I heard that, I said, boy, he must have written that himself. But this person makes it sound like maybe they're a wrestler and not an actual employee. When they talk about being forced to touch other people, you know, that may have been early 90s WWF. That could be a whole Dark Side of the Ring episode there. But, you know, without attaching their name, it's impossible to know if it's legitimate or not. And nor is it going to get WWE shut down in the state of Florida. If WWE ultimately does get shut down in the state of Florida, it's not going to be because, you know, John wrote an anonymous message to the Board of County Commissioners. But it doesn't make for good press for a company that has already gotten a ton of bad press over this situation. Speaking of more bad press, Vince McMahon was sued by the now former XFL commissioner, Oliver Luck, we learned this week, in federal court for wrongful termination. The suit was filed just 3 days after the league filed for bankruptcy. He sued Vince. He did not sue the XFL. He did not sue Alpha Entertainment, which is this company that Vince McMahon set up. He sued Vince McMahon himself. Now, the terms of his contract were redacted in the lawsuit, so we can't read it. The rumor, is that the contract was for somewhere in the $20 to $30 million range over 5 years, and that if he was terminated without cause, he would be guaranteed the full amount of the contract. Now, defending Vince McMahon in this suit is his consigliere, Jerry McDevitt. You've heard his name mentioned over the years a time or two. He's always there to defend Vince. He said that in his letter to Oliver Luck, in Vince McMahon's letter to Oliver Luck when he was terminated, McMahon listed several reasons as to why he was canned, but we don't yet know what those reasons are. We can't see the contract. We haven't seen the letter that Vince sent to him, so we're still in the dark about a lot of these details. But there was a very damning article by Ben Fisher on the death of the XFL on the Sports Business Daily website about a week ago, before word leaked publicly that Oliver Luck had sued Vince McMahon. This article came out about the very secretive nature in which the league found, basically took the actions they took, and how people in the league who worked for the XFL found out that the league was dead and found out that they were basically going to be out of a job. Right up until almost the very end, they were led to believe that there would be another season in 2021, and they were told to prepare accordingly. You know, Oliver Luck himself, he was said to be completely blindsided by the news. He was not kept in the loop on things, even though he was the commissioner. April 2nd, Vince met with the president of the league, Jeffrey Pollock is his name, and nobody knows what was said during that meeting. It was, I think they may have been the only two in there. It's a very secretive meeting, but league officials had reason to believe that it had to do with planning for the 2021 season. You know, they heard multiple times, they were assured Vince McMahon, he's ready to spend $500 million of his own money. He knows there's going to be losses incurred for the first few seasons, but the goal is to spend money, get the league set up, and then hopefully, you know, the big payoff, I guess, would be in television rights fees. That was the goal. But they kept hearing Vince McMahon, $500 million, he's committed to this. He knows there's going to be losses. Now with everything going on, there's going to be losses. but they were, they were comforted by the fact that, they kept hearing that. So they just thought, hey, it's business as usual. We're getting ready for next season. Now, before that meeting between Vince and Pollock had been briefed on venue agreements, the possibility of relocating two of the teams. They were going to move Tampa Bay, possibly the Tampa Bay team, to Orlando. The New York Guardians were going to have their home games from now on at the much smaller Red Bull Arena and not MetLife Stadium, which is where the Jets and Giants play. Budgets and schedules were being developed for the new season. They were being submitted to the commissioner. At that point, communication from Pollock, from Vince, from others, all of a sudden became very, very spotty. There was an all-staff meeting that was called for March 27th. All of a sudden, it got canceled. Without any justification, just canceled at the very last minute. And then days later came that conference call that lasted less than 4 minutes, no questions taken. The XFL is dead, and you're all fired. It's basically what the nature of the meeting was. Oliver Luck is said to be a very well-respected name in football. So, if nothing else, to me, when I read all, and it's a very damning story, right? But the fact that, this is such a respected guy that they brought in to be part of this, and for this to be handled in the way that it was handled, now he's suing, it's a whole mess. If nothing else, to me, this proves the XFL, unless Vince sells it to somebody else, the XFL is dead and buried for good. At least under Vince McMahon, because why would anybody in football want to work for this guy after this? I mean, money talks, I get that, so I guess never say never, but why would anybody in football, any respected coach, executive, I'm not even talking players, why would anybody in their right mind want to work for Vince McMahon after this in another XFL restart? Nobody would. Now, whether Luck wins his lawsuit is going to depend on exactly what the language in the contract says. McDevitt has gotten Vince out of a ton of jams over the years. He is very good at what he does. If there is a loophole to be exploited here, believe me, he'll find it.